Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Throne of Avarice project. I am your host, Ohano, the Procedural Barghest. I have with me a co-host that's going to help me do some commentary today.
Hello, my name is Kincade Sather. I go by Cade. I'm a good friend of Ohano, and he has invited me on this time lapse on a project he has worked on. I'm not too knowledgeable on the ways of environmental building like he is, so I'm going to be asking quite a bit of maybe quite simple questions.
I thought it would be a great contrast to invite King to this because I would need someone's outside thoughts on both the project and the process. And although he might not be as knowledgeable as I am about the terminology, I think it'd be a little perspective.
Yeah, another side of the coin kind of thing. I like the idea, so let's get started. All right, so right off the gap, we have a photograph on this. Is this kind of your like reference image?
Yeah, this
that
is
you
the
used?
reference image. Actually, you and me created this reference image when we were messing around with that AI a while back.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Do you remember what kind of like terms we were looking for?
So
What
that
exactly?
one, if I remember correctly, the prompt was like underground grimdark was something like that. And we
Mhm.
ended up with this like grandiose looking almost crypt thing, which was the second that I saw it, I was like, "Oh, I need to make that."
Right. I remember that. That was, man, we spent a lot. We didn't spend as long as like other sessions just messing around with like AI images and stuff like that, but that one was pretty fun.
That one was fun. We have like
Yeah.
what, like 2,000 photos saved of just
Yeah.
AI madness.
Yeah, we have I did check it one time, like compressed, it's like a gigabyte.
Yeah, uncompressed, it's like 5.
It's
It's crazy.
massive.
It's
But
massive.
so right now you're working on the pillars itself, and it seemed I don't know much about modeling, but I know about a lot about like 2D art. And with every 2D art, you start with simple shapes, and so you're starting with pillars, which are squares, and building it out from there.
So essentially, this first thing, it's called blocking out in actually I make games, and games refer
Okay.
to this as blocking out usually. When we block out
hmm
something, we just get the basic shapes, just like you said with like 2D art. We just want the basic shapes. We want to see the silhouette of what the final product will be. Now,
Yes.
with this here, it doesn't at all represent the final product, like not even close,
Mm.
because I was essentially right here trying to recreate the image and the perspective of the image. But that's not what I wanted for this project. I wanted to be inspired by it, but first I needed to see how it looked when I created it myself.
It kind of seems like you're kind of like stretching a little bit, getting worked up and getting ready to work on the actual project. 'Cause, spoiler alert, I have seen the end result. It is wonderful and also very different from this. I think the
Yes.
only thing I really remember that is kind of similar is the throne itself. There's just a throne, but I don't think it's even the same design in the final result.
No, it's a very different design for the throne.
hmm
The throne was one of the last things I actually designed in the final version. I
Mm.
went through like several iterations of thrones, and basically none of them looked interesting. I looked up lots of references from like Skyrim and stuff like that, medieval fantasy games that have
Right.
thrones in them. And the thing I find about thrones is that it's not about the shape of the throne, it's about like the colors of the throne. But I wanted shapes in my throne. So the final product
hmm
was a little more overly designed,
Oh,
but I
oh,
think
of
it turned
course, it's a
out really
throne.
well.
And you talked about having Skyrim being like an inspiration. Do you have an inspiration that you keep coming back to for projects or anything like that? Would Skyrim be the
So
big one for that?
it depends on the project and it depends on what the project builds off of. So for this
hmm
project, it was all medieval themes and grandiose designs. Grandiose designs, I look to projects like if you ever heard of Shadow of the Colossus, where they got the big colossi
Oh
walking
yes,
around,
I love that
massive
game.
scenes. I love that game. That game is
hmm
amazing. I look to that game a lot when it comes to like overarching scale, to
hmm
scale that's so big that it's unbelievable. And when it comes to medieval games or medieval titles, I think of ones like Skyrim and Dark Souls. And I don't find myself looking at them a lot
Right.
during projects unless I need to. For instance, this project, all I had was this image, and I think the only other thing I looked up on my own was a throne. Everything else was just this image in my head.
Wow. So you are quite self-sufficient when it comes to creating. That is...
I try to be. I think it's important to have some sort of self-sufficiency when it comes to creating ideas, but I don't subscribe to the idea that references are a bad thing. I think references are a great thing. It allows you to learn, and it allows you to keep proportions correct. In another project, for example, that'll be on the channel soon, there's one of me making a character design, and character designs are really hard to get right, and you need a lot of references for them. Whereas something like this, where it's architecture, you can use as many references as you want, but since it's fantasy, you can basically have a field day with it.
Yeah, an absolute field day. And I haven't been really talking about like what's exactly going on, but I see a little like what looks like a camera view in the top right. Is that what those little like geometric kind of like a pyramid looking black
you see that
pyramid in the
pyramid
center?
down there by the floor. That's actually the camera view. And in the top right, I locked this part of my screen so that it was always looking what the camera was looking at. So whenever you want to see what the final render might look like at that time, it'd be in the top right of the screen. And it stays consistent throughout the entire time lapse, except maybe at the very end when I turn on the shaders.
Oh, I see. I see. So,
Actually wanted to I wanted to talk about this part right here of me setting up these rounded pillars. Soon after I created like the base block out that we were seeing a while ago, I looked into the idea of making like some sort of hexagonal or polygonal kind of circular interior, because I really liked the idea of it. And I used this method where I basically just took two squares and then I would rotate them on an axis from like the center of the room. And it was so inconsistent. You can see me like tweaking stuff over and over and over again. I think this is probably one of the biggest problems I had starting this project, was getting this room to look good. And eventually, you'll see it here in a bit, I actually abandoned the idea of doing these like very tiny tweaks for it, and I actually used something called geometry nodes, which is procedural modeling, and hence my name, the Procedural Barghest. I do a lot of procedural modeling, but I try to avoid it for some scenes, as sometimes having the manual control over something is better. But in this case, it actually wasn't.
It saves a lot of time, I'm guessing.
It saves a lot of time, and it keeps things a little more accurate than my, stupid monkey brain can probably make it.
Or what you can eyeball and kind of guesstimate how it's going to look. Okay, so then you using these nodes have helped kind of create the pillars around, and now they're gone? Or are they like
so
just
like this was me trying different things to get these pillars to work in like the polygonal sense. Like I was using modifiers to make them like point towards the center instead of me doing it by hand. And I tried this for a while. Like that's a majority of these first like 10 minutes is me trying to get this to work, because I really wanted the pillars to be spaced in a specific way at the start. I wanted to have like two big pillars next to each other and then little pillars between the two big pillars. And the best way for me to do that is manually. Although after all this tweaking and stuff, things didn't start lining up properly. When I was making things, you see that like this looked like it was starting to work, right? But when I would go to make like the archways and stuff, they always had this very sheer sort of angle to them, and that's fine. It would look okay, but it just wasn't what I wanted. And right here, I'm actually tweaking the camera a bunch because I'm looking at the different angles.
Just trying to get it exactly right where you want it.
I also want to see what more of the room looks like, because in the final renders, I actually have more than one camera view. And I wanted to see what other camera views would look like. And usually, if I wasn't going to make other camera views, I wouldn't even be modeling this much. Like, I would only be modeling the 2 or 3 pillars that you would see, and that'd be it.
Right. Why model something that no one's going to see?
Right. But since I did plan on making multiple camera angles, I modeled the entire room.
Yeah, getting the whole room figured out is probably way tougher than just 3 or 4 pillars, so I
Hmm.
totally get all the fidgeting and tweaking and stuff like that. It's are these the archways you were
Yeah,
talking
these are
about
the
that were
archways.
very
They were kind of annoying to make with the method that I used to make them.
mm,
So I made them using something called hard surface modeling, which is how I made most of the things in the scene. Is you basically just edit things manually. You do extrusions. You make things bigger, make things smaller, move them around. You do it all manually. That's hard surface
mhm.
modeling in a nutshell. Uh, and it just, if you look at it, it looks very hexagonal. And if you were ever looking at it from like, oh, there we go, top view, it just looks kind of lazy,
A little goofy,
a little
I would
goofy,
say.
a little goofy, a little lazy, uh,
Yeah.
and it just didn't feel right. Here, I'm actually trying to fix the orientation of everything. I'm trying to bring it back down to the floor. Sometimes, whenever you add stuff in Blender and you start doing things, you do it like on the wrong plane, or it's too high, or it's too low. It doesn't have to be on the floor. It's just a nice practice. You see
Mm.
here, I experimented with trying to get them to go further out, the different pillars. Uh, and an issue that I found with this is that having extra pillars in the background is nice and all, but sometimes they weren't very visible because they were just duplicates of the ones in front of them. So sometimes they would just look like an after shadow, basically. It did add depth, but not the right kind of depth. And you can see here, I basically completely abandoned that room idea.
So you just
Uh,
kind of threw it all away, or is it
yep,
all hidden?
it's all
Okay.
hidden. I don't ever delete most of my things. You see right there in the right, there's something called old structures that has all the old things that I basically trashed. I don't delete anything usually unless I
Just in
really don't
case.
need it. Yeah, just in case I
Mm.
need it. You see right here, I'm using geometry nodes. This screen on the bottom is the editor for geometry nodes, and whenever I click on that little monkey head near the center of the
Hmm.
screen, I'm editing them.
Oh, I see. I
You
see.
see, I model the pillar in the center, and all the other pillars are created naturally for me. And I use
Hmm.
various different tricks to make sure that they're lined up properly. I believe in this trick, I'm deciding how to evenly space them about.
Get them all working right. So these, all these little uh, boxes
They're called
are like
nodes.
nodes. All these little nodes are like pieces of code, basically.
Essentially, yeah. Uh, Geometry nodes works off of a very expansive node network, and it is essentially just visual scripting, but
Hmm.
with even less knowledge of how scripting works. Uh,
Like kind of like what was that one? It was like that kids coding game, like Scratch or something like that, where it
uh,
visualizes
I
the.
don't know that one. I know that JavaScript has a visualizer for their
Mm.
training stuff. I actually went through a JavaScript class with their
Ooh,
training things, and we had visual coding as part of ours. Uh, and that
did it
visual
help at all?
coding versus this visual coding is very different because unlike it being like just code, where like you're getting uh, you're comparing things, you're creating fields and stuff like that. You're not really doing that here. These are way more complex. They're more built for you. Like
Yeah, I was gonna.
there's a lot of stuff coming under the hood that
Mm-hmm.
that I as a 2-year user in Blender still don't know about.
Right. It looks very complicated, and especially the pillars, the big pillars, which I was going to comment. They kind of look like pints of beer.
Yeah, they do. These first pillars didn't look that great, but they were something for me to play around with while I was messing around with geometry nodes. Geometry nodes tends to take me a lot of time. In fact, I think this part of the time lapse was the most cut down part because there were several times where I would run into an issue and I literally couldn't fix it, so I had to like stop the recording and go and try to fix it. A
So a lot of like
lot of
behind
trial
the
and error,
scenes.
honestly.
Yes.
A lot of trial and error.
Mm,
Geometry nodes is decently documented, but because it's basically an in-house coding system, you can basically do anything with the right trick. But
and because of that,
and because of that,
anything can go wrong.
anything can go wrong. Anything can go
Mm,
wrong, and there can be any number of ways to fix the issue. Um, and sometimes when you look up issues, you'll find some other issue because that issue is more common than the issue that you're having. Or maybe the thing that you're having isn't properly supported and there might be a way to do it, but no one knows a direct way of doing it.
So, what's kind of the hardest solution to figure out? Like, have you ever had one that's still like mind-boggling to this day that you just can't figure out? Or
Let me think. Are you talking Blender in general or just geometry nodes?
geometry nodes, is there some like a project that you couldn't finish because you just could not figure out a certain like node issue?
So there's a project that's also going to be released on the channel that, although it got done, it wasn't completed in the way that I had wanted it to be. So in that project, it's procedural actuator. So I'm basically like creating pistons and like actuators, like hydraulic systems kind of.
Okay.
I'm doing it with geometry nodes. And it's honestly, its final product is pretty simplified, but the project that originally came from it was so simple, and there was a glaring issue with it where like the actuator would like flip around on itself because it doesn't know which way is up. And trying to describe to it which way is up is a very difficult task when you don't have anything else attached to it. So like imagine you're like a spinning top, right? You know which way is up because gravity pulls you down, right? But you don't know which way is left or right. One, because you're spinning, and two, because there's no direction that you're pointing. So I had to basically give a top a direction to point at and stay pointing in that direction. And it sounds simple, but it's not so simple to implement.
Easier said than done.
Yeah, it's easier said than done, especially if you want to do it like all in the node system. Sometimes there's stuff that you can only do outside of the node system.
So when you mean outside of the node system, do you mean like in this kind of self-building area? Or
yeah, pretty much. So the way that I ended up fixing it was if I needed a point for it to point to, I needed to create that point in Blender. I needed to create a point in space that it could see and detect. And I couldn't do it in the node groups because I couldn't tell it which way was left and which way was right. It only knew up and down. That's it. So I ended up making like empties, which are just like they're like little gizmos that you can spawn into Blender. And they don't do anything. They're just there to be there. They're mostly there for like rigging.
They're like an invisible ankle?
Yeah, they're like an invisible anchor. Yeah, that's exactly what they are. And basically I used those to point where the actuator needs to go. I think that was the hardest thing to take because I really wanted it to all be in the node system, but it just couldn't work out.
And is there a reason why you wanted to be all in the node system?
So the idea behind the project was, one, I wanted something a little more robust for myself because I use pistons a lot in my current projects. But two, I plan to put it on my Patreon and possibly sell it otherwise. And I wanted it to be very ease of use for anyone who uses it. I don't want to like write a 10-page manuscript on how it works.
Like a plug and play.
Yeah, I wanted to be very plug and play, but I just couldn't make it as plug and play as I wanted, but I still think I simplified it significantly.
Well, that helps in the long run, because if you put it out just the way you had it in the first run, I think it would have been kind of a disaster. It's easy to say, but I haven't been really commenting what exactly is going on. So you're doing a lot of hard modeling.
Yes, I'm doing a lot of hard surface modeling for both the pillars and the I don't know what you'd call it, but the ring that goes around the top of the pillars.
The support beam, something like that.
I know it has a name, I just don't know. Structure arch? I don't know. So with these pillars, at least at this point, I wanted them to look a little better, but I just really wasn't understanding how I wanted them to look. Because the reference image, they're these very geometric, very square, but very
angular,
like fractally look to them. Like there was like squares on squares on squares on squares, and I didn't want that. It looked good, but I didn't feel it. I wanted something a little more like you would see in a palace. Something a little bit more in a wealthy rounded location, not gothic. I didn't want gothic.
So like overdone, kind
Yeah,
of.
overdone. And hence the name of the project, the throne, or the Crypt of Avarice, as it was also called. Uh, it's supposed to be like a reflection of greed, greed and avarice. It's like the crypt of a deadly sin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Because I don't know the Avarice. Is that how you pronounce it?
avarice. Yes, greed and
I
avarice they're interchangeable.
Okay. So it's a word,
Yeah, it's a
not
word.
like
It's a synonym, I believe.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yep.
So
Now you can see here
that's
the way that I did like the round parts on the tops of the pillars, the columns.
mhm.
That actually stayed throughout the entire project. But the bottom parts of the pillars changed even after this point. And right here, I'm trying to do. Oh, right there, Blender crashed for a second. Forgot about that.
Oh no.
Right here, I'm trying to do the arches, and I tried various different ways after realizing that hard surface modeling was just going to be too long and too tedious to do manually. I tried doing this, which is basically me taking a curve and then giving that curve a thickness, and then moving the curve so that it creates archways automatically for me. Right here, I tried turning that curve into a mesh and then making the archways again manually, and then I would rotate them similar to how I built the circular area in the first part before I restarted and did geometry nodes.
So you're taking parts of what you did before and placing it back onto here.
Yes.
So what you did last wasn't for nothing. You
Right.
kind of
The
learned a couple of
method
things.
is still useful.
The execution wasn't. But...
Yeah. Although at the end of the day, I still didn't end up doing that for the archways. I ended up doing something a little bit different. And that won't be till later, so I'm not going to discuss it right now. But I will discuss what it ended up doing for like the ring that goes on top of the columns. So
yeah, what exactly did you do?
For that, I actually did something very similar to this, except I just did less of it. I did this right here. I basically created a point to each one of the tops of the columns, and then I subdivided it so that it gets like smooth. It becomes like a smooth circle. Right here, I'm not doing that. I'm working on the arches, but later I work on the top ring. I smooth it out, and then I give it the skin modifier, which basically just gives it thickness. And then I just adjust the thickness to my liking and then cement it so that it doesn't change.
So the skin what exactly?
Skin modifier. It's it basically takes a line and then creates like a profile around it. Like it extrudes it into a box. Like imagine you have a line and then around it you get a box.
2D to 3D.
2D to 3D. Yes, that's a good way of putting it.
Okay. In Layden's terms.
You see here, I was just trying to rotate arches till they looked okay. And this worked. I just didn't like it.
I see. All right. And you still are fidgeting quite a bit with these arches. Did you ever...
The arches were the long-standing issue. At this point right here, actually, I took a break from them, and I was like, nah, I need to take a break. The arches were defeating me at that point.
And I didn't comment on this, but a big pit, did that just go... Did you just have the idea of like, oh, a cool big pit underneath the throne room would be really cool?
By the time that I decided that I didn't like the round layout that I did the first time, the second time I built it, I was like, ooh, you know what would be cool? A death pit. Just for no reason. I was like, Abyss. I like Abyss.
Don't go to your throne room with a hangover. You will not make it.
I'll fall right off. They'll never find you.
I think he's down there. I don't know.
I think he's down there somewhere.
You want to check?
How far is down there? I don't know.
I don't know. And so these 3 pillars that are all next to each other, these are kind of like the parent to all the other pillars. So what if you change that, they kind of all the other ones kind of copy.
That's actually exactly what they're called, the parent.
Oh,
they're called the parent, yeah. Or they are also sometimes referred to as the instancer.
I'll keep it to the parent.
Yeah, the parent is an easier term. The instancer is specific to geometry nodes, but Whenever you have like something that is the original object, you usually call it the parent, and then the objects that are created from it are called the children. They're the children of it.
And so, what exactly are these little black and turning white squares?
So
Are
these
these?
black and white dots, these are points, and these points are where I'm putting all these different pillars. The reason why some of them are turning white and some of them are turning black is the white ones I'm selecting, and I'm selecting those white ones to put like the little ones down, and the black ones I'm separating out for the big pillars, essentially. You
Right.
basically
Okay.
take a selection, put one instance on this selection, put one instance on the other selection.
Ah. Okay. I'm picking up what you're putting down. That makes a. Well, that's quite simple, but that must help quite a lot with, instead of like individually choosing each pillar that you just finished and like getting rid of it or changing it manually. That
Oh, absolutely. Especially if you
it's
don't have like anything to like guide you with keeping it nice and even.
right. And speaking of like making it easier, is like most of your like learning Blender itself, so now that you've been using it for a while, is most of it just making it more efficient nowadays?
I would say that after a point it becomes less making it more efficient and it becomes more learning faster or more productive methods. So like for example, whenever you're modeling in Blender, you can move things around, and there's something called a snapping tool, and you can go up there and click on the little snapping tool. It's going by too fast, so you probably won't be able to see it, but it's at the top. It's a little horseshoe with the 4 dots next to it.
Oh, I saw it for a split second, kind of center of the screen.
Yeah. So the snapping tool is like the most useful tool, in my opinion, to most hard surface modeling, because it just allows you to take something and move it directly on top of something else or at a certain distance, something like that. That's what it's used for. And you can use it by either clicking on it at the top to enable it, or you can hold control while you're doing an action, like moving something or rotating
Oh,
something.
okay.
And
So
I started doing that like half a year in, and I have never gone back, because just using control is so much faster than going up there to click on things.
yeah, well, I'm not big in Blender, but I know a little bit. I'm not a master, but I know a little bit about Photoshop, and that's the exact same thing. Is they have all the tools on the left and on the top, but there's all of them, or most of them, are key binded, so you
Right.
can use keybinds for most of it. You don't never have to touch any
Shortcuts are
of that.
so important to learning faster flows.
Heck yeah.
But I also don't think that it's necessary to learn every shortcut, because oh my god, there's so many of them. There's a shortcut for
yeah,
every tool on the
100%.
left there, on those all those red tools. There's a thing for all of them. I don't know any of them. The only one I know is inset faces. That's it, and that's I.
Oh yeah, that's the same thing with Photoshop. Photoshop has a keybind tool for like the gradient tool, which I don't know how often you're going to be using gradients, but apparently there's a keybind for that. I don't know it at all. All I know is that it exists. It's like control something, but
Right.
like you
I
said,
also
you got to kind of choose which ones you should learn.
Right.
Because
Yeah. Pick and choose which ones you're using are the ones you should learn. Like the knife tool and the inset tool I use somewhat often, and those are the two that I know.
Right.
I should really learn the loop tool one. I don't actually know what the loop tool one is, and I use it a lot. I should really learn it.
Hey, well, that's a good thing to learn along the way. Maybe on down the line another time lapse or something like that. It would be
Yeah.
you'll be seeing you using that now. So
And I'd say that another big part of learning how to just be quicker in Blender and learning better methods is also just your method of modeling. For instance, there's 100 different methods to making the same shape, right? Like
right.
this shape, I'm doing it manually. At least mostly I am. But you can see that like as I'm messing around with this one corner, all the other corners are doing the same thing. That's called mirroring. Mirroring is an amazing starter tool that I think every Blender user should know. It's just amazing. You can take something, you can split it in half, or you can split it into fourths and mirror it on the X and Y axis, and you just edit all sides of it at once.
Oh god, that sounds so easy.
It is. It's so nice. It's so easy to do things with it.
you're not stuck trying to copy it and
rotate it or
mm-hmm.
flip it around or trying to make sure that everything else is the same size or width, because that's hell. That's hell.
Yeah, no.
I have been on projects where like the tiniest little degree is very important, and when you mess one up, you mess them all up, because then you're referencing an incorrect rotation, and oh no, it's pain.
Where'd you work, NASA? Good gracious.
Actually, it was a spaceship design that I made a long time ago.
Well, you was talking about that kind of reminded me of, I forget what it was, but NASA had a whole bunch of parts built in somewhere in the Europe. I'm not going to say exactly which country, but they did all their measurements in like centimeters, and then we did all of ours in inches. So when when they built it, it fell apart. It was like a satellite or something like that, but like, I don't know. It's just kind of an important communication is key life lesson there.
Here, this is an important part. So I've created these lines that represent like the tops of the columns. And these are actually what I ended up using to make the archways for the final version.
I was about to ask, you said they were the tops and not, I thought those lines represented the column or like the arches in between the columns. So.
Yeah, they become the arches, but they themselves are basically extruded from like the tops and the top middles of the columns.
I see. So
and I actually used geometry nodes to make the final archways, which was pain and suffering, let me tell you. It was horrible.
You're pretty good at hard modeling or hard. What's the full term? Hard
surface modeling, and then this is procedural modeling is what geometry nodes is.
Okay, so procedural seems to be a lot more numbers crunching kind of.
Yeah, it's very numbers crunching. Oddly enough, though, you don't need to know a lot about math to really get into geometry nodes. Like, if you want to make something super precise, then maybe you need some more math knowledge, but a lot of the times you can look up formulas for certain advanced things. Like, for example, one formula that I recently have used a lot is like one to find like the outside angle of a regular polygon.
Oh,
so
yes.
like if you needed to rotate a hexagon half of the distance of its line, what would that rotation be? I know how to do that now.
I see.
And it's actually really handy for geometry nodes because I work with a lot of circles in geometry nodes.
Heck yeah. And I'm guessing a lot of these nodes do a lot of the math and formulas for you.
Yes, there's a lot of them that do it for you. There's a lot of them that don't too. It's kind of split in my opinion. Like some of them, they give you so much, and then others, they don't give you anything.
Are nodes made by other people who use Blender, or are they made by Blender themselves?
They're made by Blender themselves, although there is a small niche of Blender users who are actually like Python wizards. That's what Blender uses, by the way. It uses Python for its
Python
codes.
coding.
The Python wizards sometimes make their own nodes out of just raw data, and they'll make those into add-ons that you can then download for free, or if they have them being sold, you can find them on like Blender Market or Gitbash or what's that other one called? I don't remember.
I don't know why you're asking me.
There's another really popular one that Blender users use to sell things.
I see. Have you made one before?
An add-on? Yes, I have actually. I've made an add-on, and I've made. Technically, it's 2 add-ons, but the other one's not really an add-on. It's more like a project file. I made a procedural.
Let me try to remember one.
Aurora Borealis.
Oh, that's the one I remember. Is the Aurora Borealis? Yeah.
That one was actually using geometry nodes. That was one of the first things I ever made in geometry nodes.
Wow, and you did quite well because those look amazing.
And I consulted with a bunch of people because I really couldn't figure out how to use Python. Python is so confusing. I already just don't do code. Code is too much for me. But
yeah, I went to college for computer.
Python's bad.
Yeah, it's really bad.
It's bad to understand. At least outside looking in. I'm sure once you get the hang of it, you get the hang of it. But
hard learning curve.
Yeah, really hard learning curve. Learning cliff is what I've heard. I work with game devs. I am a game dev. I'm an artist on a game dev group, and I every once in a while I bring up how confusing Python is, because every once in a while I look at it in Blender and I'm like, oh my god, it's so confusing, and they're like, yup, it's confusing, and I'm like, oh, you want to give it a shot? No.
No.
These people have been coding for like years, and they're like, no, I don't want to touch Python.
It's like when have you ever seen like the programs that people had to use to make like video game music in the early 90s?
Yeah, they're basically
It's all
glorified.
numbers.
Yeah,
It's all numbers and letters.
Basically
There's
like
no
a glorified spreadsheet.
It's you could probably go into Excel and make a chip tune.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Hell, nowadays people just use Minecraft.
Yeah, people just use Minecraft. If anything's got sound and that you could like tell when the sound can go, they made music on it. Sorry, a little bit of a tangent. Speaking of that, did you hear about the guy who made like a 8-bit or 16-bit computer in Terraria?
Yes, I did. That is so cool and so impressive.
Yeah, geez. Did he have to make like a custom-sized world, or was that in the world? I couldn't tell if he made.
If I remember correctly, it wasn't a custom-sized world. He needed to mod the game so that the whole world could be loaded.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay.
Because like the world was completely empty. It just had the computer in it.
Right. All right, and so back to you modeling. You are using those kind of tops of the pillars as like a guide for the lines for the arches.
So the way this system works, and I'm gonna summarize as best I can, because it's honestly confusing even for me. This one was essentially what it does is I took that guideline, I put it down, but I put it down in like a waveform kind of look, which created these archways. I basically used
is that
like
what
a wave.
Is that what that red graph is?
Yeah, that's what that red graph is. It's basically the control wave for it. More precisely, it uses like it uses the index of each one to make them, but that's too much information. It's not helpful to understand. And then it basically, once it has that line that creates the bottom curve, I then extrude it with various methods that were really confusing to make it all solid and stuff. Because extruding it just up didn't really work very well. It caused like a lot of vertices to be way too close to each other, and it caused weird shading issues.
Yeah, it's a lot of things next to each other.
Yeah. Right here, I was trying to see if I could do something special for the bigger arches, but I believe at the end of it, I just gave up and just had them be regular long arches.
Yeah, so... man, it's quite a lot of fiddling.
Yeah, it's a lot of fiddling. That is Geometry Notes 101, fiddling.
And I'm seeing on like the bigger arch, right above there, there's like weird shadows. Is that just kind of like something clashing, the model clashing with itself?
Yeah, it's some inconsistencies with how the model was created. So for some reason with these bigger arches, they were having this issue where the vertices would skew too far away or too close to one another. And there was another issue where their index, which basically TLDR, an index just says the ID of a vertex. So like if you have like 5 vertices in a line, 1 is 0, 1 is 2, 1 is 3, so on and so forth. And it caused all sorts of issues. So I think I did end up just removing those archways.
Yeah. And now you're working on like some sort of entrance.
Yeah, I'm working on an entrance. Now this entrance is nothing like what the final product was. I just kind of wanted something there. And I was working on it to also get a break from archways.
Yeah.
The archways hurt me in this project.
And you making this doorway reminds me, is there a set scale to like Blender models? Like, do you have to make them a certain size for it to be like a certain height, or can you like, when it's done, just kind of scale everything to a certain size that you need it to be?
I don't know. I think it heavily depends on what you're making it for. This is for a render and it stays in Blender, and for that purpose, you can scale it to whatever you want. It actually, I think the radius of like the inner like circle is like 400 meters.
Jesus.
In Blender, anyway.
Right.
That's not
Does Blender have its own units?
Huh?
Does Blender have its own, like, units?
Yes,
I know, like...
Blender has BUs as Blender units.
Oh, they're just called Blender units?
Yeah, but...
Okay.
So Blender units are... They're just think of them as the metric system is the best way I can put it. They're just units. They're just another form of units. I have mine set, and I believe it's the standard nowadays, that it just is basically meters. It's just the... What is it called?
It just helps.
The opposite of the empirical system. The metric system. It's literally called the metric system. What am I on about? Right here I'm sculpting out the gold piles that surround the whole thing.
Oh yeah, the gold piles. I was trying to think about, like, why are you making hills, but the gold pile makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, these are the gold piles. I used a multi-res modifier.
And I do have a couple of questions about the gold pile. So once you start like going and more texturing it, I will have a lot more questions about that. But gosh, yeah. So you just kind of feel your way and feel like what the gold should look like spilling out and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. I didn't spend as much time on the gold piles as I might have on other projects because they were going to be further away and less in focus. At some point, I was thinking about making them a little more realistic, but at the same time, it would have been too taxing on my machine to do so. Right here,
and
this
so
isn't
away.
the texturing. This is just me giving it a color mostly. Just because I wanted to see what the color looked like. Granted, this lighting is terrible, but
it's the flat lighting for this. It's not supposed to look good right now.
Yeah, it's just flat lighting. World illumination is what it's usually called. Actually, that's what it's called in Unity. I don't know what it's technically called in Blender. I just always have referred to it as global illumination. Oh, right here I'm making the roof.
Oh yeah, the roof.
Which basically is almost non-existent in the renders, but in case it was, I wanted to make it.
It's... I don't know. So you said we talked about mirroring with the pillars. Are you doing like a mirroring right now with every single
So I'm not right here. These are all individual points that were extruded from the top of the pillars. But I don't know if it's soon. I think it is. At some point, I actually do cut it up, and then I mirror it on the X and Y, so I'm only doing a corner.
And so you do 4 corners.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was just kind of wondering how all 8 legs were all moving at the same time.
I was just selecting all of them at the same time. You can select as many things as you want, but sometimes, they need to move in different ways, which is what mirroring is useful for. So right here, this is where I make the top ring that goes around every layer. And right here, I was looking into one, I was gonna beef up the way that looked. And I had this idea in my head about like these like weird diamond shaped tops to the area, but it just never worked out. Just never liked it. Oh, there you go.
And there you are mirroring it.
Yep.
So I see. It kind of looks like a spider web.
I know, yeah. Yeah, I saw that. I saw that too when I first made it.
I'm like, ooh, it's the Spider King.
King. I was experimenting with like even bigger roofs, but one, it wasn't ever going to be seen, and 2, I just didn't quite like it, and it would have been painful to make an actual roof for it. These are just like the supports of the roof.
Right. So, do you, even though it's not being seen, do you want roofs to be somewhat modeled for shadows and stuff like that?
For shadows, yes. Especially for the first half of me doing this, because in the first half I was using something called a sunlight, which, as the name implies, it creates a sun. And it casts light in one direction throughout the entire scene. That's the usefulness of a sunlight, is that you don't need it to be placed in multiple locations. You only need one. And I was going to use that as like the light that comes down into the center in one of the final renders.
Like a skylight.
Yeah, like a skylight. But I ended up in the final version of my lighting, which the lighting isn't actually in the time lapse because it was a little too demanding on my computer. But when I did the final lighting, I actually didn't use sunlight. I used an area light because it worked better with the volumetrics that I was using.
So aerial light. Okay.
Area light,
what's the main
think
difference?
of it like a plane of light versus a point of light, or versus a sunlight.
So it's like a window pane
it's like
of
a window
light?
pane of light. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It can also be a circle, but...
Right. It's just kind of more of a even spread.
Yeah. It's a constant even spread. And it's really useful for volumetrics.
And I'm seeing a bunch of like notes written in blue. What are you exactly writing those down for?
So the little notes in blue that are by like the pillars, they were me noting down how like tall a certain piece of the pillar was and how many vertices the pillar was around.
And I'm guessing that's written in like meters?
Tall, it's written in meters, but the number of vertices for the around.
I was thinking about the tallness. So
yeah, tallness meters. Yeah, I exclusively use meters for Blender because meters is just a little simpler to understand. It's also easier to just like scale things. Like if I make something 1 meter, I can very easily understand what something is going to look like at 10 meters. Because it's just 10 times 1 meter.
All right, and you are...
So if you look at the pillars right now, the big ones, they got these domes on the top of them.
Like the half circles.
Yeah, little half circles. I didn't end up putting those in the final version. I put them in there because I needed a way to like... As you see right here, I'm fiddling with the inner like arch that goes over the top of the roof. I wanted that to like blend in to the rings a little more, and I tried using a dome and it didn't work out.
I see.
I ended up just making them stay a little stagnant. It actually ended up looking a little better like that for some reason.
Kind of a little late to give my advice, but what I would have done is probably like teetered off so it kind of like ramped into the side of the inner ring. I don't know how to explain it other than that.
No, I see what you mean. I did try something like that. I just didn't care for the look at the end of it, like where it actually met it.
I see. It was too flat.
Yeah, it just looked weird.
Because I'm guessing you have an idea of what the material of this place is going to be made out of, right?
Somewhat.
Somewhat stony.
I knew I wanted like stony, bricky, maybe some obsidian look to it is what I had in my head, but I didn't know the specifics.
And having that ramp go into there, it looks nice, but it kind of looks plastic.
Yeah, in my head, artificial.
It looks. Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Artificial. This is the actual roof. I wanted to mess around with it a little bit, but I didn't end up changing it any. Oh, there's me looking at the reference image again.
You're going back to it.
Yeah, every once in a while I go back to it.
So with something like this and how detailed it is it safe to say that this is a little bit too high polygon to be putting into like a video game or something to walk around in?
For physical assets that don't move, a higher polygon count isn't terrible. It really depends on the game. It depends on the materials, and it depends on how much of this you're going to see. Like, I would probably cut down on like half of these polygons for a game scenario where it would only be in like maybe one cutscene, you know? If it was a location that you would visit constantly, maybe I wouldn't lower it as much, but I definitely lowered in some locations. Anything that's like a circle has a lot of polygons, and so I would limit those.
Polygons are straight lines, and you're trying to make a circle out of straight lines, so have to use a lot of them.
Especially the center pit that goes down, because like the outer circle that encompasses the whole thing, you never see the edge of it, so it doesn't matter how high the resolution is. But this inner pit is so fine, it's got a really high polygon count, but it also doesn't move, so it wouldn't be horrible to put into a game.
Mm-mm. And these red squares, are you kind of like
These
measuring?
these red squares are like what I imagine the scale of the one on the left being the smallest one being a human, and the two
Mm.
bigger ones being like some special giant creatures, which would be like the owners of this place.
Oh, so you're trying to get the scale of like how big the door should be and
Yeah, how
stuff
big the
like that.
door should be, how big the throne should be, how big the bridge should be.
Mm-hmm.
Oddly enough, in the final like product, the bridge is a little small for the biggest character size. I mean, like it's fine, like it's perfectly fine,
Right.
but it's a little small.
A little scary.
Someone could like push you off the bridge if they were standing next to you.
It's a one-way. It's a one-way walkway.
Right. But like if you're like a regular human, like you could like go shoulder to shoulder with like 8 people and still
It's
have
massive.
room. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, the scale. Using the helping with those doors. I like that you kind of did like a doggy door for humans.
Yeah, it did 2 small doors for smaller creatures, and even the smallest door could somewhat fit the largest character,
What, not comfortably?
but not comfortably. No, that's what the big doors.
Why
for.
would they walk through there?
Yeah, why would they walk through there? Especially if they're wearing anything like armor or weapons or something like that. Get stuck
Right,
on
you
the
got to think
door
of.
frame.
No, that would be You get the janitor over with a. I don't know.
You gotta put it in the square hole.
Yeah, where does the orc go? That's right.
That's
the
right,
square
the square
hole.
hole. Oh, this door gave me so many issues when I first started messing with it.
What are you trying to do?
So
exactly?
the first way that I made the door was hard surface modeling, and that works fine, but I needed to prototype it more. So I actually used the same method that I used for making like the roof, where I just used a line and then I thicken up that line with a skin modifier. It's the same thing, but I used it for the doors, and it made these archways a little easier to make. I did not end up hard surface modeling the final product. I actually just kept these because they looked good enough.
I see.
I blended them in so that they look like they matched a little better. And then I took the big one. It should be coming up here soon, but I took the big one, I copied it, and then I put it over the whole thing to give it like a almost like it was inset into a bigger frame.
Mm-hmm.
That should be coming up here.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I don't know what I was doing there.
Ooh.
Oh yeah. Yeah, skin modifier doesn't like it when you extrude things like that.
Yeah, it kind of looked a lot like I forget what they're called, but they're in gardens. They're like little arches that vines can grow on.
Yeah, the
trussels.
Trusses? No. I think they're called trusses.
Trusses. Yeah. My mother would know. Trusses. She gardens a lot, but
yeah, here was my second attempt at trying to get it hard surface modeled, but I just ended up going back to the skin modifier because it was just so much better.
Yeah. And every time you look up, I see like a head. Is that the monkey head?
It's probably the monkey head, yeah.
Why a monkey head?
So the monkey head is something that comes prepackaged with Blender. It's called Suzanne. It's just a random thing that you can create. It's just a mesh. It's really useful for like previewing materials. I just do it because I don't know. It's funny.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of do it. Just whatever my container is for the geometry nodes.
Oh, so you have to have them like contained
in an object,
somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They're considered a modifier which you apply to objects. So you need an object to begin with. It can be the same object that you're using to make the stuff with the geometry nodes, but I like using a Suzanne head where it can.
Right. And so, kind of an odd question with that. So when you, like, if you export this kind of geometry or something like that into like a video game, does the nodes have to come with it too?
So the nodes are not transferable between Blender and other things like Unreal or Unity. Neither are procedural shaders, by the way, which is quite a shame. But they just use systems that aren't present in the games. Instead, what you would have to do for geometry nodes is you would have to essentially apply the modifier, which basically means you solidify any changes that it made to the mesh. So it turns it into a solid object. And then you would export that.
Okay, that makes sense. Because I was just trying to think of like when people take like cameras out and they find like squares in the middle of nowhere. I was wondering if that was their kind of like geometry node place that they forgot to take out or something like that. But
Well,
I don't know.
sometimes when you see like little pieces of square geometry or spheres out in like the void of different games, there's any number of things that they could be. They could be there
Right.
that contains like a shader. It could contain a character, and it's just, or it could contain like a jump scare, for example. It could be part of a cutscene. It could also just be the container of a script. I don't know much about that, but I do know that objects can hold scripts in Unity.
Mm-hmm.
So something similar, honestly, to geometry nodes.
Okay. And I'm seeing now that you're using like a different color. Is that just kind of to differentiate
Yeah, it's just so that I can see it a little better against the backdrop.
see how it's going to look
Mhm.
when it's all modeled
I don't
or
really get
textured?
Huh?
When it gets all textured is what I was saying.
That, and it's also just easier for me to like work with. I don't really get a lot of eye strain from Blender. I do a lot of stuff on the computer. I'm basically always on the computer. I don't really get eye strain, but it does become hard to see some things when you're moving around doing things and everything is white.
Yeah.
You can make it so that every object is a random color, but sometimes that gets nauseating. So I
That
just assign it a color myself sometimes.
Sounds like clown puke.
It is. It's like Sharky's player model in Lethal Company.
Oh. I don't think they're gonna know who we're talking about. But
No, I for the whole group that I play with, I made custom suits for
Lethal Company.
Yeah. And she asked for something that was really like loud and outrageous.
Lot of colors. I think besides her, I think the max amount of colors on somebody is like 3, 4.
Yeah, 3
maybe.
or 4. And
she's got like 8.
Yeah, that's even
and they're
like
all
counting like the outline colors. Like 3 or 4.
Lime green and
she's got
purple.
Like lime green, bright purple, yellows, blues, a little bit of red, grays.
It helps us identify her, but
yeah, we'll never lose her.
Nope. All right, and these little circles, what are these?
These were the placeholders for like the lamps, or maybe at some point I was also thinking about making them like supports for the bridge, but they ended up being lamps.
All I thought was like, do you remember the beginning of Toy Story 2 where Buzz is going through trying to defeat Zurg and he has to go on these little like button battery little...
Oh, yeah.
That's what I thought it was. I was like, okay, a good Toy Story 2 reference. Yeah, a lot of my expertise with art is watching movies and stuff. I don't really make a lot of things. So a lot of my knowledge is going to be like, oh yeah, I remember in this Francis Ford Coppola interview that he talked about something similar to this, or something like that. So thankfully it hasn't devolved into that too much, but I can't believe I forgot about those lamps, because what made you like think that you wanted the lamps? You just didn't have enough light?
The second that I had the bridge, I knew I needed the lamps, because although it would have been cool to have like just floating lamps, I wanted them to, again, the whole point of the project is grandiose. And the lamps just really tied together that extra like, ooh,
bougie.
Yeah.
Heck yeah, because it definitely shows off kind of like a rich life, having all these lamps and
very affluent.
If the pile of gold doesn't help you.
Yeah, if the pile of gold don't set it off, the lamps definitely do.
Yeah, it's the lamps that do it.
It's the lamps that do it, man. How can you tell someone's net worth? By the quality of their bridge lamps.
That was people in like the turn of the century with electric light. They're like, so how many lights, how many sockets are in your house? Only 2? I have 4.
I have 4. Peasants.
No. And the lamp design, I'm guessing that came purely from your mind and stuff like that.
I knew I wanted it to like somewhat resemble like a medieval brazier, but I also wanted it to have its own unique style. So I went through
brazier. That's
no, that's the things that they put like fire in.
They're
like the giant. They're like the little bonfire.
The iron.
Yeah, the iron
bonfires
that they
cages.
put around. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely getting that now. Now that you've explained it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's definitely looking like that.
And I definitely experimented a lot with just the way that these looked. I tried all sorts of different things. The final result I really liked, but I was trying like a bunch of like things that like came from the side or kind of wrapped around in weird locations. The final product I think was the best I came up with. But I do think I could have made them a little bit better if I'd given them a little more time. But the final render came out great.
Yeah, the final render came out amazing. I can't wait for everyone to see this. Maybe they already have. I'm not entirely sure when the commentary.
They've seen the renders.
Okay, all right. So we can talk a little bit about that.
I'll also sometimes whenever we're mentioning the renders, I'll be putting them on screen. So.
Oh right.
Yeah.
Hey, Editor Ohano, put a dog here.
No, don't make me do more work.
Okay. Get rid of the dog.
I have 3 whole videos to edit.
Oh,
I haven't even edited this video. I literally edited this time lapse together last night so that we could do this recording.
Oh yes. That was
right
on time.
Meeting. Yeah, I'm surprised I got it done as fast as I did.
Because I have like about probably as much as this video will be until I have to skedaddle. So everything's just kind of right on time. You know,
worked out pretty well.
Oh yeah,
especially since I had a meeting yesterday, so it'd have been a little rough to do it yesterday.
Ooh, yikes! You know, everything just came falling right into place.
Yep. I don't know why I made these little notches on the side of the bridge. I wanted
like faux railings.
Some little difference in the bridge, but I ended up removing them. They just didn't look good.
I kind of like them, but I get the idea. The gemstones, on the other hand, I'm kind of.
I really like the idea of like the prism gemstones. And it's also reminiscent of my little stamp, my little broken diamond stamp.
Oh right.
And I tried a bunch of ways to get these things to look like they're anchored properly. I liked this for a second, and then I looked at it again. And I was like, no, I don't like that. I don't like the hanging crystal thing. So instead I opted for something that was a little more almost looks like it's floating. Which was like the swirly design, which should come up here any second. Yeah, it should be this right here. Yep.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah. That does look really good.
I really liked the swirly design.
Double helixes, or is it triple?
It's a triple helix.
Triple helix, yeah. Time lapse is going so fast, it's a little hard to count.
Yep. I actually considered making time lapse even faster because it ended up being like 2 hours.
Yeah, well,
actually, it was like 2 hours and like 30 minutes. I actually was able to cut off like around 40 minutes.
A half hour.
Yeah.
Jeez. Well, hey, if people are listening now, they're here for the long run. Yeah, they're going to stay till the end. You're stuck with us now.
Yeah, you're stuck with us. No takesy backsies.
No. You ever wonder what people are doing during a commentary like this? Do you think they're actually just watching the whole thing?
I don't know. I like to imagine a couple of them are just brain dead.
You mean just? I hope you mean just asleep.
Yeah,
right?
No, like just asleep or just not paying attention.
Okay.
I know that's what I do whenever I watch time lapses. I just usually don't pay attention.
Yeah, I'm usually doing something else while a time lapse like this is going on. But it's still nice to come back and see what's going on and stuff.
Right.
Which, speaking of going on, a little bit of an identity crisis with the balcony here, or throne room floor.
Yeah, I changed this thing so many times. Definitely not as much as the archway or the door, but I definitely had some problems with it because I wanted it to have enough space to where it looked like a bunch of people could gather in front of the throne, but I also wanted it to look and have an interesting shape. So I tried multiple ways to make it look. And you can see right here, I'm actually adding like this little trim that made its way into the final product.
Oh yeah.
And although the trim stayed, I kept changing the floor after this point.
Right. It just keep trying and making sure it looks nice. And
yeah, because I just was not happy with the floor.
Floors seem easy until you have like it's a balcony or like a floating like this.
Yeah.
It's suddenly the shape seems very important, and
another thing is like with it the way that it is now and not how it looks in the final render. I really didn't like that like it basically funneled into the throne and not around the throne. Like you would basically have to walk right next to the throne to get behind the throne, which just didn't look right.
right.
And right here, I'm trying different designs for like the floating trim. There were some designs in here that I did like, but they were just a little too weird or wispy for
Too
my
weird or like too woodland. It feels
too
like.
woodland. Yeah, a lot of them are very woodland. There was one that was basically just a tree. Uh, there's also one that was like a oh, I think it's this one actually. This one is like a wing almost.
Oh yeah, with feathers or
Yeah.
like what it's supposed to be feathers. Yeah, a little too whimsical. It like
It
this is
just
a
didn't
fantasy
fit.
setting.
Yeah, but it was more
Something to
like
point.
it's a crypt, you know.
Yeah,
Uh,
evil.
the final design, although I didn't intend it to look like one, it actually kind of looks like a spider from the top.
Which cool.
Yeah.
Spider. A lot of people think spiders are bad, you know.
You see
But
right
yeah,
here, I'm
no, the
changing the
wings
floor
and
again.
the wings and stuff like that. You know, like you said, it's with your earlier stuff, you don't throw it away. So you could use this sometime in the future.
I think the one exception to that was actually this trim. This trim was the one thing that I actually did just destroy and remake over and over again. But that's
Yeah,
mainly because it's simple to make.
mhm.
It's just a line, and then the line gets thickened by the skin modifier. I used that method so many times in this project, and it really paid off.
Yeah, I've been seeing it, a lot of things being scaled up and stuff, and it's quite a useful tool.
Oh, yep, this is me expending the floor because the bridge was just a little too long.
A little too long, yeah.
This right here is where the big lamps were born from. Because there's this little divot right here, which I eventually turned into just a hole in the floor. That eventually became the big lamps that sit next to the throne.
Oh yeah.
Before this point, I
yeah.
actually didn't know what I was gonna do for like.
You're like
the
holes in the
area.
floor. Why not? It is quite grandiose. So.
Oh, here we go. We're getting really close to the spider.
Mm-hmm.
See, no, I didn't like
It's
that. Didn't like that one. I think this one was the no. One of these is like the tree-looking thing.
We'll see it when we see it.
Yeah, we'll see it.
Also, looking at this top down makes me realize
this is the tree.
lamps and the bridge. Oh yeah, very definitely. It looks like a leaf.
Yeah.
But it looks like a spinal column. The bridge and the lamps.
Yeah, I noticed that too when I was making it. I was like, it kind of looks like a spine. Ah, here we go. This is the final design. It looks kind of like a
there we
spider
go.
with holy teeth.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Didn't have to say that, you know.
Yeah, see these pillars, which were originally like planned to have pillars right there, just to give some more pillars next to the throne. They turned into the lamps in the final product.
The big lamps, yeah.
Oh yeah, see here I removed those weird side things. I don't know, I just didn't like them. I think I probably could have made them better, and maybe I would have kept them, but I just didn't like them.
Right.
Here I'm adding the trim to the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And then right here, I'm separating out the lamp piece from the bridge, from a copy of the bridge.
So you can get a copy of the lamp.
Yep, and then I can put it there.
Yeah, you scaled it up. It looked a little thin.
Yeah, it looked a little thin.
A little dehydrated.
Yeah, I also added double the rotations on it too. So it
looks less spaced out.
So wait, a sextuple, right? Sextuple helix is what that would be.
I just say too many.
Too many. Seems accurate. Oh, this is when I first started messing around with the throne.
You say that like this is kind of the beginning of a very long journey.
It was at the beginning. Oh no, this actually wasn't the throne. No, this was the eye. This was the eye in the center of the floor. I actually did some research to see like what like icons or things were like could represent greed or avarice as a deadly sin. And surprisingly enough, there's not a lot.
Money.
But I did keep seeing like, yeah, the number one thing was money. But of course it was. Like I got money covered.
Yeah, plenty of it.
But the more common things that I saw were triangles and eyes. So I tried to work some eyes and some triangles where I could.
So you just put two of the symbols that people think are the Illuminati together.
Yes, exactly.
Like, super Illuminati.
Right. I'm like, oh man, this is just Illuminati, ain't it? It's like, oh, you know, it looks good. I'm gonna keep it.
Yeah, why not?
You see, this is when I was looking at the Skyrim thrones, and I'm like, they're just kind of simple, but with fancy materials. That's all they were.
Well, yeah, if I remember correctly,
they're just giant box chairs. Like that's all they are.
Yeah, they're giant box chairs. Isn't that what most thrones are? They're just giant. Boxes.
They're just giant chairs.
Giant chairs.
You know, I wonder if like an authentic medieval throne is actually comfortable.
I
feel like it wouldn't be.
I don't think it would be. I don't think they knew what the word comfort meant back then. They think they did.
I think the point might have not been comfort, though. It might have just been status, you know, because it's a throne.
I'm guessing that their bedroom chair is way more comfy than...
Oh, I bet, man. They'd probably be those really nice, like, medieval versions of, like, an easy chair.
I was thinking just, like, a medieval beanbag. It's just made out of, like...
Does mother know you are sleeping in her beanbag?
Your Highness, get up.
Get up.
5 more minutes.
5 more minutes.
Your Highness, what's a minute?
No one keeps track of time like that. You see right here, I was trying to make the throne look a little more interesting.
Yeah,
it's also just really difficult to model in general because there's so many like different shapes in a chair that it's a little hard to keep the edge flow proper.
Yeah, it's hard to keep everything looking natural and nice. It probably explains why a lot of designer chairs were designed like 50 years ago.
Yeah.
They're like, they got it right. We don't have to change it. We got it
right the first time. We don't need to change it.
Right. It's what's that? Haagen-Dazs? No, that's chocolate. Haagen-Dazs.
Haagen-Dazs, yes. My favorite thing.
Herman Miller. I think... Herman Miller, I think, is who I'm thinking of, who made the designer chair in like the 1960s. Did you know Singer Sewing Machine made furniture?
Really?
Like just straight up bedroom furniture. Not anything like, I don't know. I saw some at a thrift store a couple of days ago. It's a crazy idea. They're dressers, but they look like dollhouses.
That sounds wild.
It's crazy. It's just like, oh, they have some dollhouse furniture. No, they mean furniture that looks like dollhouses.
You wouldn't hit a guy with glasses, would you? No, but you'd hit a guy with glasses. Well played. This is the same level of stupid.
Right. Very same level. It oh man, I don't know if they heard, but who them? No. What was I gonna say? These metal bars. These are quite something.
Yeah.
At least very very Art Deco.
Very Art Deco, yeah.
With the 3 lines going in the one, and it's you just make them out of gold, and there you go.
Yeah, make them out of gold. There you go. That's what I did. It worked.
Hey,
it worked pretty well.
Make everything out of gold. Why not?
Everything gold.
Everything's gold. Is there a reason why? All right, you were filling out the armrests,
Yeah.
and it was kind of the lines were on like a weird diagonal.
Yeah, it's just the way the topology ended up. The shapes are kind of strange, so it was weird to work with the topology and try to close the faces properly.
I see.
Topology it's like a whole class of Blender, honestly. I try my best to keep good topology regardless of what I'm doing, simply because I want to keep with the good topology practice. But there are some
Topology
times where
is
you just
how
have
many
to.
polygons, right?
And topology is it's the relationship between the edge flow of polygons in a mesh. So like if you have, for example, topology for a character, you want all the faces to be squares and you want to make sure that they all connect to, other squares. You don't want a bunch of triangles in a character model because it needs to deform. Anything that doesn't deform can work with triangles, but quads are usually the go-to. Another important thing about good topology is that it allows modifiers to actually work properly. Like the subdivision surface modifier, which like smooths things out. So like if you had a square, you gave a subsurf, it would look like a ball, for example. If you made that square instead of out of a bunch of triangles somehow, it would look all sorts of distorted and weird because triangles are different than quads. And they cause different relationships between modifiers.
Okay.
And trust me, there's a lot more, but
yeah, I was about to say I think this is the first time in the talk that you've truly lost me. it's I can tell I can you had me at it's a whole entire class. That's about as far as I went before. I was a little confused, but I can get why it's a whole class.
Yeah, topology can be really confusing to both understand and to maintain. But is it ever so important and useful?
Oh, right.
Especially for hard surface modeling, which is primarily what good topology is for.
So, and since you use hard surface modeling so much,
so
it's something you use quite a lot often.
Quite a lot.
So with hard surface modeling, is that kind of like the go-to that everyone uses for modeling in Blender?
When it comes to modeling, I'm not gonna say no, and I'm not gonna say yes either. Again, it depends on what you're doing. So, like, if I'm making, for example, let me think, what's a good example here? If I'm making a vase or a vase, whatever, if I'm making a vase, I'm going to do it with hard surface modeling and put maybe a subdivision surface modifier on it so that it looks smoother. And if I was making like a human face, I would use sculpting. Sculpting is basically like working with clay, but in Blender.
Oh, okay.
It's the best way to put it. You're literally sculpting. You're using clay or marble or something similar to sculpt with. That's the closest real life comparison. And sculpting's really handy for characters, environments. I used it for the gold, for example. It's really good for making stuff like that. Anything that's like a landscape, it's excellent for that. Hard surface modeling would be very hard pressed to do the same thing. Not to say that there's not methods to do it that way. It's just less common. And, just time consuming. It's much easier to use sculpting for certain things.
Okay, so I was just wondering.
But then, kind of course, the go-to. There's other ways too. Like there's procedural. There's geometry nodes. It's a great modeling experience.
What do you think is the most archaic? What's like the most like? Why are you doing it that way?
I have seen people because I frequent r/Blender help, usually to help people out. Every once in a blue moon to ask a question myself. And I've seen people who actually model using Python, like just the raw scripting in Blender, because Blender is an open source, so you can just script anything you want so long as you have the knowledge to do so.
Oh gosh!
And I've seen people like use Python, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's amazing things you can do it on your own. And that's also how some people make custom objects for add-ons, and that's perfectly fine. But he was trying to make like something insane. I think he was trying to make like a skyscraper using just Python. One, I couldn't help him because I don't know anything about Python. But two, it just, oh my god, it was so much, and no one on r/Blender help will help you in Python because no one there does Python.
I'm. Good lord.
Yeah.
If you ever find that post, I'm probably guessing it's like they probably weren't working on a skyscraper or something like that. But if you find that post, please send it to me because that seems insane. And if you ever do find it, like show it on the screen or something.
Yeah, I will. I'll go see if I can find it later. I think that was like a week ago, so it shouldn't be too buried.
Right. So you're now working on the sword.
This was just a placeholder.
Oh.
Well, whatever. It's fine. This is my antivirus being annoying. Oh. So these are just placeholder swords, mostly just to get the scale and maybe an idea of where I wanted to put a sword, because I wanted to make a sword for the throne and a sword to stick into the ground, like that little one is, but man, that little one was so damn tiny, I could barely see it in anything.
Yeah, the little one's human-sized.
The little one's human-sized. In the final version, I ended up making like a SWI to put into the ground, and I scaled it up slightly, so it was much more noticeable. Before, it was way too small. You just couldn't see it.
Just way too small. Human-sized,
and right
way
here,
too small.
This was a completely scrapped concept. I was thinking about making some sort of triangular shield to also go with the sword. One, I don't think it would have fit really well with the final sword that I ended up using anyway, because it was more like a saber kind of look to it. And I don't know about you, but when I think of sword and shield, I don't think of saber and shield.
No, I usually think of like a one-handed.
I think of like a gladius or a spear.
Something like that.
Gladius or a polearm. That's what I would imagine. And right here is the actual sword for the for the throne. I used a lot of subdivision surface modifier to make this look good.
Subdividing it to make it more smooth.
Yeah, make it more smooth. So basically the actual geometry that I was playing with was all these little points, and there wasn't actually a lot of them, and I just used subdivision surface, god, that's hard to say a million times fast, to make it all nice and pretty so I didn't have to do it myself. And I think at the beginning of making this, I was like, ooh, hook sword. And then later when I made the hilt, I'm like, ooh, now it's a saber. And I was like, damn, this is cool.
So I'm looking at like the Z-axis fly around on the top right. Is this sword like 300 meters tall or something? Because like when you go to the bottom, it's good gracious.
Yeah, it's like 200 meters tall.
Oh god.
Yeah, my scale is kind of thrown out of whack. Like, it's definitely not 1-to-1 with how I'd expect the scene to be, but yeah,
this is a little too big.
It was really big. It was really important for this thing to have really good edge flow. So like the way that the line like goes up and around and meets at the point of the hook, that was really important, because otherwise it wouldn't make this nice sharpness to it. It wouldn't look right. The sharpness would be like jagged in places. So I had to spend a little extra time making sure that those lines really looked good on the basic model.
All right, and are you trying to continue the sword here? Or
right here is going to be like the hilt.
Oh, yeah.
So right here's the handle, and then right here is the guard. Which, again, I used the skin modifier to make at least a majority of it. First, I was like, I kind of want to give it like a little spindly thing at the end. I was like, no, that looks stupid. And whenever I make a sword, I actually always start with that particular crossguard, because it reminds me of a messer, which is an actual medieval sword. And I love messers. Granted, not every messer had that kind of crossguard, but the ones that I really enjoy do. Fun fact about messers is that they were actually peasant weapons.
Really?
Yeah, and their name Messer means knife sword or sword of knife or something like that.
Hmm.
Because although it was a sword, it was constructed like a knife. So instead of it being like attached to the hilt, it was actually like a cord that ran down, and then you put two sides of a handle on it, like you do like a kitchen knife.
Oh, okay.
So it was a
Okay.
sword that was a knife.
With a very long tang in the center that
Yeah, very long tang in the
I'm using
center.
that, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's what
Okay.
that's called.
Hey. All right. Well, hey,
And then right here, I'm
that's
making a little like binding to go around the
give it some grip.
give some grip.
Sure. Sword's not tall enough. Make it another 100 meters.
Another 50 meters now.
If I can't, if the half the world can't carry it, it's not big enough.
This is the lever that they spoke of in legend. Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall
even
move
next to
the
the
world.
throne. That is a huge sword.
Yeah, it's a huge sword.
I dig it.
I was having trouble figuring out where to put it. I was like, floor, because I didn't want to stick it in the ground. I wanted to be able to see the hook, so I ended up putting it across the throne.
Right. All of us have that issue. Where do we put our swords?
Where do we put our swords? I have that issue. I own swords.
Yeah. Well,
I got a cabinet for most of them. But other ones that are just kind of laying around.
Fun fact for everyone listening: Ohano has defeated 23 people in duels.
What?
He has 20. Nothing. So he's kind of like Andrew Jackson. So don't mess with him. Is it Andrew Jackson?
I don't even know who that is.
He was one of our presidents of the United States.
Oh. I am not a history buff, except for when it comes to swords.
So okay, so history buff here. Andrew Jackson was a known hothead and would duel a bunch of people, and he has like, I think it's close to like 50 people he killed in revolver duels or gun duels. He was also like upper 60s, I believe. I don't remember exactly, but he was quite old when he became president.
He was up there.
Yeah, he was a crotchety old man and also a horrible president. He was the man behind the Trail of Tears.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so bad guy.
Yeah, bad guy. Quick little comment aside on this floor here. This floor design where I'm making like this weird tile look was actually completely scrapped. At first I was like, I kind of like the idea of some tiles, but it just didn't fit the scene very well. But I was able to make some pretty interesting tiles.
It does look like a definitely does look like a 50s like linoleum.
You know what it also kind of reminded me of in the while I was messing with it. It also reminded me of like if you ever been to like a skating rink. It kind of reminds me of their weird carpeted floors.
They're weird carpet. Yeah, those ones are just messy.
Those ones are just messy.
Excluding the stains of chocolate and soda on the floor.
And
and popcorn and the fourth smell. You can't figure out what it is, but you always your brain knows what it is.
Yes, my favorite miscellaneous carpet smell.
Yes, I'm smelling a hint of stale popcorn, child's urine, and etc. I don't know if we can swear or not, so.
It's allowed.
Okay.
Just try not to, overdo it.
Yeah, well, I've done 0 so far, so. Well,
I've also done 0. I'm pretty proud of myself.
I thought you were gonna just drop an F-bomb right there. Man. So right now you're doing kind of like you're trying to find like
trying to find a floor type that I liked. I tried weird things. I tried noisy things. I ended up going with some kind of marble look.
Yeah, I get the kind of marble look.
Marble was definitely like my backup. Because like I didn't really have a direction for this floor. I just wanted it to be interesting, so I ended up making a pretty advanced marble shader, and I made it like a black smoky marble.
That's fun. Because black marble is quite an expensive. Well,
Yes,
all marble
I love
is,
marble.
but
Marble's so pretty.
yeah, it's you need a stone floor, marble, perfect.
I would love to have a stone floor in real life, like a marble floor, not a cement floor. Marble floor.
I was about to say, just go to your basement.
Right. Oh, we don't have a cement floor in our basement. We have a rock floor in our basement. We got a really old basement.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, mine's cement and sadness.
Sadness.
Mm-hmm.
Ours is built like a dungeon.
Fun. I used to live in a house like that.
To enter, you gotta go down like this winding round staircase.
No way.
Yeah, it's a round staircase. There's basically like zero headroom because they had to put a bunch of pipes right there.
Oh God.
Yeah. There's actually another way in, but you have to like leave the back door to get to it.
Is it this like the storm cellar?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But smaller entranceway.
I see. Yeah, no, where I used to live was I don't know how to explain it, but there was like a shelf about hip height made out of the brick foundation along the entire exterior of the house foundation. It was all red brick, and because it was red brick, when it would rain, it would brick's porous, so it would get through, and so the entire basement was damp.
Oh no.
When it would rain, not because it's flooding, but because condensation.
Right. I bet it got real musky in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a dehumidifier on like 24/7. I love that place.
The dehumidifier into the shower. There you go. Infinite water.
No, what I did is I dehumidifiers have like a little storage tank.
Yeah.
I kind of jerry-rigged it so that it would just go straight to a plastic pipe, like a flexible pipe, and I just had it go to the drain, and it would just constantly just dump water into that drain.
There you go.
It was, I estimate it probably took out like 4 gallons a week or something like that. Like a lot.
That's a lot for just condensation.
Yeah, it was a lot, especially when it would rain or after in the springtime. That was really bad because that's actually when it would flood with all the snow. And I lived right on the edge of town, and my neighbor was the cornfield. So I had all the snowdrift.
Whistling winds.
They don't talk much.
They don't talk much.
They have all the ears, but they don't listen. Yeah, that's a farm joke for everyone out there.
A farm joke. I got it. Okay. Oh, I remember this texture giving me a lot of issues.
Yeah, what are you trying to go for a different stone texture?
So for the ring around everything, as well as like parts of the various pillars and roofs, I was gonna go with like a brick texture, but I was having troubles making it because a brick texture in Blender doesn't really go on a circle. It prefers a wall.
A wall.
And
shape.
I really didn't want to do UV editing. However, even after all this changing around and messing with things, I actually did end up just UV editing it and putting a brick texture on it.
Oh, thank goodness. Yeah, because I'm seeing screensavers.
Yeah, like these were some pretty
Those
wild
are
ideas.
stars.
Yeah. I was trying all sorts of things.
Oof. And was there a reason you kept it? Oh, there we go. We got some sort of gray. Or is that when you used UV editor?
Yeah, I'm using the UV editor right there on the left.
Oh, okay.
So I split up the mesh properly, and then it makes the bricks go down the mesh instead of like just kind of looking like they're flat on it. I don't
stretch
honestly, out of everything I know in Blender UV editing, it's not that I know less than everything else, it's that I do less, because I don't like UV editing. It's painful to me.
UV editing is one of the few things I hear about from Blender, so...
Like, don't get me wrong, UV editing, the process is there. It's not that the process is wrong, it's that it's tedious. It's just the wrong kind of tedious that I don't like.
Boy.
And this right here was an advanced trick that I recently learned that I've been trying to use more and more because I want to learn more about it.
What's it called?
It's called I call
I don't think it has.
edge angle edgeware because
Okay.
it doesn't have its own name. So
Yeah, I was
in
about
geometry
to say,
nodes, or actually in Blender in general, if you have like an edge that's like too sheer, like let's say you have an edge that like bends at a 20-degree angle. If you use shade smooth in Blender, it will actually try to make that edge smooth instead of sharp, right? But if you have something like over like something like 40 or 45 or anything past that, like 90 or more, then it will make it a sharp edge. And if you use geometry nodes, you can actually collect the data of where these sharp edges are. And if you have that data, you could then take that data, put it into a shader, and basically detect where edges are. And we use that as a mask. So wherever the white parts are, I put a slightly different texture to make it look like that there's worn bits on the edge of the stone.
Okay.
It's pretty handy, and it's a lot better, in my opinion, than some of the other methods that you would usually do to do edgeware, because it's less intensive on my computer, mainly. There's a couple of other ways to do it. There's one where you use ambient occlusion, but ambient occlusion just murders my computer if it's turned up too high, and if it's not turned up too high, it looks terrible.
You have kind of a beefy computer, don't you?
Not actually for Blender. So I do and I don't. My CPU is it's an 8-core Ryzen. I don't remember the particular type. I think it's a Ryzen 7. And it's a really good CPU. My CPU has gotten me this far in Blender, and it's amazing. Work that it does. But the problem is that Blender does not support my graphics card. So I actually cannot do anything with my graphics card. Whenever I render, I actually render with the CPU. I'm sure that people watching this, if they've actually been using Blender a lot, they'll understand, one, the pain, and two, they'll understand why the renders look the way that they do. There's parts of the renders that look a little like squidgy, and that's because I didn't use a really high sample rate because I used the
smudged?
CPU. Yeah, it looks a little smudged. I think my sample rate for this project was only like 80, which is really low. Like, I would more expect someone to use like at least a minimum of 128 for something like this. But upwards of like 1,000 or something if you had a really nice GPU. And even still, the 3 renders that I did at 80 samples took me 6 hours. Yeah.
Oh boy.
It definitely doesn't help that I'm using only procedural textures. Procedural textures definitely take longer to load into the scene. But I don't like UV editing.
Yeah.
Better shaders.
So, if you ever got a new GPU or a GPU that would work with Blender, would you ever go back and re-render some of your older renders?
Most likely, yeah. Especially some of my really old ones where I didn't know how to, like, even back then I didn't even know how to use what I had. I'd also love at some point to re-render some of the older scenes from previous versions of Blender, because in 4.0 they really tightened up what cycles can do a lot better. And I definitely learned a lot more tricks with the newer cycles than with the older cycles. Cycles is the rendering engine for their raycasting, which is what I use. They have another renderer called Eevee, and I couldn't use Eevee for this project because of the way that I did lighting. But I probably wouldn't have done it anyway because I just really love the way that the raycasting turns out the images. It's definitely the more realistic option, but it is very... It's supposed to be very GPU heavy, but I use my CPU. Which probably isn't good for its lifetime, but...
Yeah, it's what you can use right now, I guess.
It's what I have right now.
So if you want to get him if you want him to start using his GPU, head on over to his Patreon and sign up to his
That's definitely
even
one
his
of the
lowest
biggest
tier.
goals, is to get me a workstation of some kind so that I can actually do these with a GPU and not suffer with my little CPU.
Yeah, no, because you have a lot of potential. It's just the tools are holding you back.
Yep. That said, I've gotten very far for the tools that I have.
And that's why you're so good, man. That's it. Like, you've gotten
Optimize, optimize,
leads.
optimize.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
And
this was a weird texture, I remember.
yeah, it's
It was weird to put together because instead of using a brick texture, because I didn't want to do UVs again, and it would have been harder to do UVs on this particular shape, I instead used two wave textures, which in this, since they don't have any distortions, they're just lines basically. I
yeah,
used two
zebra stripes.
lines and then I just offset them slightly and it created bricks.
Ah,
So it was
weird.
just a trick that
Trick
I've
of the
never
eye.
tried before.
There, I'm kind of seeing it.
Yeah, see, you start to see it right there. That kind of reminds me of like those like cheap lawn chairs that have like
yeah,
the,
where they kind of the plastic
yeah,
that
they
folds
like weave
over.
the plastic weave through.
Mm-hmm.
But see, right here, it looks a lot more like bricks. Then I added another line to get like the mortar between the bricks.
Yeah. And look at that. They're, like you said, Blender is a very big tool, so you can get the same result doing in different ways.
Yep.
It's
You just
quite
have
impressive.
to understand the relationship between textures, and knowing that, you can do all sorts of different things with it.
Mm-hmm.
And see here, I basically copied what I did, and now it looks better on the sides and angles.
Yeah, just
Looks a little weird on the angles, but it looks a lot better than what it was.
right. And the angles aren't where people are going to be looking in the render. It's
right.
the throne,
And even
the
if they
gold.
do, it's again, it's better than just using.
You'd
the
have
brick
to
texture.
you'd have to be able to walk into that environment and stare at it, which can't. So
Right. And then I also added some noise to make it look a little dusty,
weathered.
a little weathered.
Mm-hmm. Good idea. That's one thing I do know is model making. In model making, if you keep something perfectly clean, it doesn't look good. You got to have it weathered
Not
for
unless
it to
it's
look somewhat.
specifically made to look clean, but in which case it's a different kind of clean.
Yeah, most people make like cars.
Yeah, factory clean.
That's factory clean. To me, that looks. To me, it doesn't look realistic because I go outside and there's a car with like a rust hole in it, or
Yeah.
So like you said, with weathering, or what was it called again with this? When you made it look more weathered, what is it called in this?
Edgeware, weathering.
No,
Noise?
like the how noise. There
Noise.
we go. No, with noise, it's just personal preference. You could make it completely clean, but
right. And there's definitely styles that do completely clean. Actually, Blender recently has had an upsurge of people making like anime content for it or from it.
Really?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways you can render that makes like all the texture or all the colors flat, so there's not a lot of super shading. And it actually makes some anime stuff really like pop. Like I've seen some pretty impressive anime stuff come out of Blender.
Yeah. Do you have any like specific examples you can kind of think of?
The only specific example I can think of is Dylan, who is honestly my personal hero when it comes to Blender. That man's awesome. He runs a YouTube channel and I think a studio now. But he made. You ever heard of the Minecraft animation Gods Don't Bleed?
I have.
One where Herobrine fights all the mobs and stuff, and it's really epic in a church.
I remember watching that.
That's him. He made that.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
He also made Gods Don't Bleed too, and he's also made some different anime stuff. I don't know if he's made like a full series or not. I haven't kept up with him in quite a while, but he's also got like an add-on that he and his team made called Mesh Trails, which I actually bought because I love it. It's awesome. And he's made some really cool anime stuff. And he also, I forgot about this. Him and his studio made a special version of Blender that's for anime. It's called the Goo engine.
The Goo engine.
I think it's called the Goo engine, or something like that.
Yeah, at least that's quite the recognizable name, at least. So it helps them animate in 2D.
So not necessarily. So basically, we're taking a 3D character and we're using tricks to make 2D aspects or 2D reflecting 2D aspects onto a 3D character. So like like when you watch anime, there's only so much shading that goes on in like a face. Like you don't see like every little piece of the face get shaded. You see pieces of it get shaded. The Goo engine set up for that, and the Goo engine has a like this cool line tool that's better than what Blender has, where it does more advanced control over like what parts of your characters get like outlines or contour lines in them. I think it's also got a built-in library for pose assets for characters. I don't know. I haven't looked into it for a while. I've never actually used it, but I've seen people using it, and it's really cool. I've been tempted to get into it, but I'm not doing a lot of anime stuff right now, and I also want to keep up to date with regular Blender.
Yeah, last thing you need to know is to learn a whole different type of Blender.
Right, and then forget how to use regular Blender. That's what I would like to avoid. But it's definitely an amazing choice if someone's looking to do like anime stuff. Blender itself has, great capabilities for anime too. Just the Goo engine just has just that little extra push.
Right. So now you're working on what looks like the final touches, texturing everything.
Yep, final touches for the pillars here. I'm using a displacement map. So a displacement map or a bump map is technically what I'm using, but I'm not using the bump node. Because the bump node lags, but the displacement map doesn't. I don't get that. I don't know why. So essentially,
works, I guess.
Imagine you have like a flat plane, like just 4 vertices. It's just one face, one square. You can give it depth by using a displace or a bump map. It adds bumps to it based on the texture that you feed it. That's how a lot of like realistic cloth shaders become realistic. It's not that it's not that the mesh is so detailed that it's got these little variations. It's that the texture slightly bumps the way that it's rendered.
Okay, so it gives it that extra push, that kind of fake shadow.
Yes, and the unfortunate thing about them is that, well, it's also the great thing about them is that their resolution is infinite.
Oh.
Which is great because that means you can add all sorts of detail, but it's bad because it hurts the computer and the frame rate so much. Which is why I remember actually disconnecting the displacement maps while I was like messing with other textures. And I connected them again for the final render.
Because you could barely move around.
Yeah, I could barely move around in some cases. At least comfortably. I try to never get Blender to a point where I cannot move around.
Right.
Especially since I'd be afraid I'd never open it again.
Yeah. I do. I was gonna ask you about like, what's the worst, like, because I know you've done some commissions and stuff. What's like how bad has like, I'm not gonna say like it's like anything to do with you, but just how big the project was to the point where your computer was slowing down. Like how much did you have to deal with?
I know exactly the project to talk about. And I'll probably throw it up on screen for a second. It's actually my my screensaver for my computer currently. It was the bigger commission I got from the ECC community. They play a game called Borrow Trauma. I actually helped found them, and when I started doing commissions, they commissioned me to do their banner for their server, for their Discord server. And it was this big underwater scene. I know you've seen it.
I have.
The big lit up city built into the side and the 2 submarines in the back. Scattered rocks and ores all throughout the place that kind of resembled the game. It was a lot. Granted, I definitely put a lot of that work on myself because it was one of the biggest projects I'd ever done, and I wanted it to be big, and I had played with these guys for years, so
You
I did get
wanted
paid for it. Not enough, but I did get paid.
I don't know.
I did get paid, but not enough.
I see.
But that one was rough. There was points in that where I could barely move my viewport. I had to utilize just turning things off and turning things on constantly to be able to move properly.
Jesus.
Especially the instances. Oh, the instances got so bad at some point.
I was about to say, what was like the biggest kind of like?
It was the instances, 100%. So geometry nodes is really useful for scattering objects. So think like trees, bushes, plants, things like that. You can scatter those procedurally and randomly with geometry nodes quite easily. But because you're scattering hundreds of instances, and don't get me wrong, it's a lot faster than doing it by hand, and it computes a lot faster than them existing there for real. But there is a point where it just can't take it anymore. Yeah.
Whew, man.
And I definitely got pretty damn close to that point.
I do remember you.
I'm doing the shader for the gold.
Yes. I wanted to ask how you did the gold because it looks really good, and I just wanted to know how you made those little circles. So now that seeing all you doing all the other textures, this makes a lot of sense now.
Yes. So essentially, this is 2 Voronoi textures. I have no clue if I'm saying that right. That's just how I always say it.
I was just about to ask, like, what?
The Voronoi texture, I don't know exactly how it works. I don't have an exact definition for you, but basically, the way that I understand it, it creates these randomly created cells that are based off of like an original shape. So like you can actually tell it to do the original shape. The base one is like rounded squares, but you can set it to like diamonds or stars. The earlier ones where you saw like those stars, that was actually also Voronoi texture. Oh. But you can get these interesting effects when you combine 2 Voronois into one another. You put one Voronoi and then you plug the other one into its scale, and you can get these like repeating circles in one another, depending on how high you turn up the other values. And I thought it was really good for the gold. I definitely wanted something better, but this was the best that I could come up with.
Right, because I was like, I loved how the gold looked. Oh, maybe because I'm greedy, but
gold.
No, gold. But no, shoot. Now I'm starting to think of DuckTales because they had an episode called Gold Fever, where it was like literally a sickness. You start getting hiccups, but anyway.
Oh, now I'm doing the crystals.
Yeah. Yeah, now you're doing the crystals themselves, which, now we're seeing the lighting come in.
Yes. So the crystals use a method that only works in cycles, where the light that they output isn't the same light that you can see on them, which unfortunately doesn't work in Eevee, which is one of the reasons why I used cycles. Here I was experimenting with like the inner like cracks of the
make it look
crystal.
Make it look more like a cut gem or something like that.
Something a little more raw, honestly.
Oh, a little bit more raw. Okay.
But something that was like crystalline in nature, so it had a bunch of little cracks, bunch of little
hairline cracks and
in it,
imperfections.
And for the lighting and generally speaking, just the other colors in general, I went with gold and I went with like this orange or like this burnt orange color. I can't remember. I think it was Angel. I think she told me that a great use of color for like greed and avarice would be orange, and I agreed with her. And so I used orange.
Yeah, it works really well. It's not because like I would have thought gold or like yellow for gold,
right?
But that would have clashed with what it's being held in, and the orange is perfect. So now you're seeing you actually lighting it up, and I could tell now because it's trying to render it every time you move it.
Yeah, so that's Cycles. Cycles is a raycasting render engine, so every little point on the camera it extrudes a light, like it throws a light bounce, and then that comes back and bounces back. which is pretty similar to how real life light works. Like, it's technically the reverse because the light comes from, a light source, the sun, and then bounces into our eyes. So technically it's in reverse, but it's still the most accurate thing we have in rendering.
Reverse engineer, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, the sword. I really loved the way the sword texture came out.
It came out so nice.
It came out so nice.
It looks like we're fine. We're coming up on the end.
Yep, we're getting close to the end here.
First, to think this place was a big bunch of stone pillars and one throne, and now it's become this huge throne room, which, if you had to estimate, you could probably do the math because this is like what 1000% sped up.
Right.
How many hours do you think this took you from placing the reference image down to the first render?
I want to say it's at least 10 hours.
At least?
At least.
It makes sense. Because I can't do the math in my head.
But that's like I didn't record absolutely everything. I recorded most things, but there are also times where like I was stuck on something, or I needed to just go like collect my thoughts or something like that.
Right.
But I think I want to say this is like around 10 hours. If not 10, then maybe 15.
Okay. Well, maybe someone down below can give us the math.
Yeah, how much would this long be?
Yeah.
At 1,000 times speed.
Mm-hmm.
Because I actually don't know. I could look at all the video timestamps that I have, but I've edited a lot of this, so
heck no.
Yeah, it wouldn't be accurate. Also, I don't like. There's so many videos. Like, this is like over the course of like 60 recordings.
Oh wow!
Mind you, like I chop them up every hour, just so that I don't get like corruption. Because if I go over an hour, it significantly increases the chance of corruption in a video.
Right.
And then I just splice them together.
60. So that's 60 hours ish. My goodness. And there you are with there's that roof.
Yep.
That kind of looks like something from Star Wars. Like.
And yep, this is the last thing right here was me setting up these lights. Now, unfortunately, I actually did not capture me doing the rest of the lighting. And that was mainly just because it was too taxing on my computer, unfortunately. And I had this issue with OBS, where OBS actually wouldn't stop recording, even though it said that it stopped recording. And I ended up killing it with Task Manager. And I thought I lost this last 10 minutes here of recording, but I actually didn't. So I don't know what I was doing. Well, but I just opted to, not record the last bit.
And then you got it rendered, and we got the final product.
Yep.
Well, this was quite the journey. I've seen you like show bits and pieces of you working on it here and there. I've never seen the full process before. So thank you very much for having me.
Yeah.
This was quite the...
And definitely, anyone watching, if you guys have enjoyed this commentary, let me know down in the comments, and maybe I can get King back for another one.
I absolutely love this, and if I could, I would love to come back.
Well, I
maybe
do have
another guest on.
I do have another time lapse coming up soon on another project, so maybe we'll get you in on that one. That one should be a lot smaller.
Okay, thank goodness.
That one should be a lot
2 hours is quite ambitious.
Yeah, 2 hours is quite ambitious. I didn't want this to be 2 hours, but it took me that long. So
yeah, no, I was debating on whether or not to ask before recording, being like, can we do like an intermission or something like that? Like,
I mean, we could have. We absolutely could have.
Yeah, we could have. All right, well, man, this was quite a fun time, and yeah, if so I don't know what else to say. I have nothing really else to plug except
I think we can call it there.
I think we can call it there.
I hope you guys really enjoyed this time lapse. I really enjoyed this project. It was really nice to put a lot of my skills to use, especially with geometry nodes, because I've been itching to mess with more of them. If you guys have questions about some of the parts of this project, go ahead and leave that down in the comment section. I will get back to that as soon as I can. But I have been the Procedural Barghest, and thank you for watching.